Not creepy but kind of cool. My mother split and transplanted a rosebush from my grandfather's farm about 40 years ago. It took but never bloomed. At that point she only kept it because it grew into the fence nicely and kept us kids from climbing it. My grandfather died about 5 years after she transplanted it, and that spring it bloomed red roses. A few years after that my grandmother died, and the spring after it bloomed white roses. These are the only 2 years it has ever bloomed. I was a rookie cop when my brother committed suicide. He was one of my older siblings, but we were very close. He died in another state, and I had a lot of guilt then about not recognizing the signs. His remains were in bad shape by the time he was discovered, so it was a closed coffin service. About a week after he died, I was back at work one night, and my partner and I see a pimp pistol whipping one of his girls. I jump out and the pimp sees me and the foot chase was on. I was running after him, gun in hand, and he cuts through a narrow corridor under a building that leads to a courtyard in the middle. Right before I reach the courtyard, I hear, "It's okay," in my dead brother's voice. I hit the courtyard and the guy is against the side pointing a gun at my head, and squeezes the trigger twice. I froze for a millisecond and then started beating him in the head with my revolver. Till this day, I don't know why I didn't just shoot him. Cuff him and walk him back to the street and find my partner. I tell my partner about him squeezing the trigger, but not the voice I heard. We unload the gun, .32 revolver, right there, and 2 bullets have strike marks on them. Take the gun to the lab for testing. Tell the tech the story. He puts the 2 bullets with strike marks back in and shoots into the test tank. Both bullets fired. We used to live in a battered women's and children's shelter when I was young, because my father was looking for us. Ugly divorce, Alabama gave him custody. Mom took us to Washington. One night, I looked in the mirror, and saw a hairy demon looking back at me. I screamed and cried and ran to get my mom, who assured me it was a normal mirror. But that night, a kind-looking man, that I can only describe as a ghost, appeared at the end of my bed. He was there all night, but gone when I woke up in the morning. Then, the next night, and the next night. He was there every night for 4 months. We never talked, he never moved. Just stood guard. Then, one night he woke me up from my sleep, and I'll never forget how surprised I was, because I'd never seen him move or talk. He said, "He's coming. Get out now." So we packed up the car and left to a hotel for the night. The next morning, we went back to find out someone had broken in and gone room to room looking for someone. I never saw him again after that. When I was growing up, I was tight with the daughter of my dad's cousin. So my second cousin, I suppose. Her name was Lisa. We grew much closer as teenagers. Too close really. Anyway, we wised up a little and went our separate ways when it was time for college. A few years passed and I had moved on. One night I got up to take a piss. Didn't bother to turn on the lights. I was washing my hands and glanced in the mirror. There she was. Lisa was standing in the doorway behind me. I heard the echo of her voice. She told me that she still loved me and always would. She then turned and walked out of sight. I stood holding onto the sink for a moment. My heart pounding in my chest. I calmed myself down and decided it had just been a dream. I tried to go back to bed. My pillow smelled like her. She could have been in the room seconds ago. I lay back down and as I drifted off to sleep I felt her warm familiar presence against my back. The next morning there was no sign of her. No scent, no indent in the covers. I wrote it off as a dream. I got a call from my mom later that day. She told me Lisa had died a few days earlier. She had been killed by her boyfriend. He got drunk and angry and he hit her and that was that. I guess she stopped by to see me one last time. To say goodbye before she moved on. Here's to you, Lisa. 20 years later and you're still the only woman I ever truly loved. Lived in an old 2-bedroom, 3-story walk-up for a time in my early 20s in Toronto. A few days after moving in, my roommate Mike chides me in the morning for banging on the wall that separated our bedrooms and pacing back and forth across the apartment at night. We just agreed he must have been dreaming or it was sounds from other apartments, as I had done no such thing. We agreed that it must have been nothing and left it at that, but this became a regular nightly occurrence. Shortly thereafter I started noticing at certain times in my own bedroom the cloying smell of cheap women's perfume mixed with a damp musty smell. Imagine an old person's clothes left on a damp musty basement floor near a litter box that wasn't being changed often enough and you get the idea. What made it even weirder is that I would be filled with a sudden horrible sense of foreboding a few moments before the smell would begin. Mike flaked out and left only 4 months into our 1-year lease, which meant I was left footing the rent for the entire place until I could find another roommate. I had decided to try and sleep in his bedroom shortly after he moved to see if things would get better. The very first night I slept in his former room I had an incredibly detailed and realistic nightmare of myself standing in the dimly lit bathroom of the apartment and cutting my own face with a large shard of glass while staring into the broken bathroom mirror. It was only broken in the dream. Soon after that I started to hear the loud bangs at night and the flushing of the toilet in the bathroom. Several times the hot water in the bathtub turned on full blast in the middle of the night. One of the freakier things that happened not too long before I moved is the time I was woken up by the TV blaring Poltergeist on City TV at about 2 in the morning. At the time that channel would always play movies late at night, but the fact that the one time my analog TV, turn a knob to change the channel or the volume, pull a knob to turn it on, turned on by itself at full blast was the time a movie like Poltergeist was playing. This just reminded me of a small occurrence that I had when I was a teenager. I was home alone for the weekend. My parents had a memory foam mattress on their bed, so it was infinitely more comfortable than mine. I decided to sleep in their bedroom and enjoy that comfy bed on night one, even though I knew they hated it when one of us kids would do that. I settled down to sleep, and felt immediately unsettled. I have anxiety, so I just told myself I was feeling off because of my new surroundings, that I was super comfy and once I fell asleep I'd be fine. I turned on the TV and watched some old cartoons. Once I was ready to sleep I turned off the TV and put the remote on the nightstand by my head. I rolled over and did my best to fight the unsettled feeling I had. I woke up to the light from the TV shining on my face, and the cartoons playing again. I was confused, but whatever, I probably just fell asleep and never actually turned the TV off. I glanced at my phone and it was only about 45 minutes after I went to bed, so I just turned off the TV again, and set the remote back on the dresser. I fell back asleep pretty easily because I was groggy already. I was half asleep, woken up a bit by loud conversation. As I woke up more and more, I became disturbingly aware the TV was back on. I rolled over to face it and it was playing this scene where a bunch of people were sitting around a table talking about something. One of the first things I realized after I woke up more was that the TV volume was incredibly loud and I had it set pretty quiet before going to sleep. I watched for a minute, confused about how the TV got back on and what was playing since it wasn't the same channel I left on before I went to sleep. I reached for the remote and my hand touched the solid wood of the dresser. Telltale horror movie music starts playing softly in the background of the scene as it pans around the room, and I'm fully awake feeling around the floor for the remote control that I must have knocked off of the stand in my sleep. I'm starting to shit bricks due to the now insanely loud suspenseful music, and the TV turning on by itself on a different channel. I decide I absolutely have to turn on the lights, so I jump out of bed and take about 5 steps towards the door when I see the remote. On the floor, pointing in a straight line from where I was standing to where the light switch was. I make a weird sound between a yelp and a cry, flick the lights on and grab the remote, turning down the volume to a reasonable level. It was completely maxed. I checked to see what show was playing and it was some older horror movie playing on a movie channel. Sorry, I don't remember what it was. Underscore 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 2 is all I know. I bug out of the room as fast as I can and just leave the TV on in superstition. Who am I to judge if someone else is trying to enjoy the empty house with me? Took me a long, long time to fall asleep in my own bed that night. Asked my parents if they ever had problems with the TV turning on randomly at all and they looked at me like I was super dense. After that I never ever tried to sleep in that room again.